A crowded courtroom, a gavel banging, and a row of officers smirking in the back. It was all a spectacle, but no one in that room knew how much they were about to lose. Power changes in the blink of an eye, and those who think they've won are often the least prepared for what happens next. Let us know in the comments section. Have you ever seen someone get exactly what they deserve when they least expected it? The grip on Isabella Morales' wrist was strong, too strong. She didn't flinch, she didn't resist, but the officer behind her still twisted the handcuffs as if she were a threat. "Keep your mouth shut," he murmured, pressing his knee against her back as he forced her into the patrol car. Isabella breathed through the pain, eyes forward. She could already see where this was headed. Another headline, another scandal, another name they had tried to bury. The university campus blurred as the car sped away, passing by the crowd of students still frozen in shock. A Latina woman, a respected visiting professor, arrested mid-sentence. There was no way they weren't recording. The phones were outside, the cameras flashing, the thick murmurs of confusion, but Isabella knew the game. The more they controlled the narrative, the less the truth mattered. The officer in the driver's seat, a burly man with a shaved head, kept looking at her through the rear-view mirror. His partner in the passenger seat chuckled under his breath. "Incredible how easy it is, huh?" said the bald officer. His partner shook his head. "We barely had to try, some of them just make it too easy." Isabella tilted her head slightly. "What exactly was easy?" Calvo smiled. "Come on, you were just messing with me." He pulled out a small plastic bag from his vest, holding it between two fingers. White powder sealed, caught red-handed. Isabella looked at the bag, then at him, slowly calculated like a teacher, waiting for a student to realize that he had just made a mistake on an exam he was so sure he had passed. "Curious," he said. "That wasn't in my hands a minute ago." The bald man's smile widened. "Are you sure about that?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The city skyline rose outside the window, streetlights passing by, flashing in rapid succession. The police station wasn't far, but Isabella already knew she wouldn't be there for long. Because here's the thing about men like this. They never do their homework. The car stopped at the police station. Isabella was dragged out, her boots scraping against the pavement, but her face remained inscrutable. She had been through worse. Inside, the officers processed her like any other criminal, the mug shot, the fingerprints, the questions. "Name," she tilted her head. "You didn't check my ID," the officer behind the desk scoffed. "You'll be in the system soon." Isabella watched as he typed something on the computer. A second later, his face fell. The mocking smile faded, his shoulders stiffened, and his eyes rose to meet hers, the confusion turning into something that almost resembled fear. Give me a second," he murmured, pushing himself back from his desk. The other officers had noticed it. Calvo frowned as he approached the screen. "What's the delay?" The man at the desk swallowed hard. "I think we need the captain." The bold man's eyebrows furrowed. "For what?" Before I could respond, a door opened. A tall man, broad-shouldered, in an impeccable uniform, stepped out, his eyes fixed on Isabella from the moment he entered the room. She didn't break her gaze. He exhaled sharply. "Oh, damn." The other officers stiffened. Those who had been laughing, joking, acting as if this were just another easy raid, all fell silent. Isabella raised a single eyebrow. "Problem, Captain." Silence. Calvo shifted uncomfortably. "Wait, what's going on?" The captain ignored him, moving closer, eyes glancing over the screen before settling back on Isabella. "I'm going to have to make a call," Isabella murmured. Let a slow, knowing smile tug at the corners of her lips. "Yes," he said, "do that." For the first time since they put those handcuffs on her, the X-room felt different. The officers who had been so arrogant, so confident, were now their certainty was crumbling and Isabella Morales was just getting started. The walls of the detention cell were cold, the air tainted with the scent of sweat and regret. Isabella sat on the metal bench, her relaxed, casual posture as if she were waiting for a flight instead of being locked in a cage. The other women in the cell gave her a glance. Then they returned to their own thoughts. None of them spoke. She knew. This was just another step in the game. A heavy clank resonated when the cell door opened. "Morales," the officer shouted, "you have a visitor." She didn't react immediately. She didn't make it easy for them, jumping up in her place. She took a slow breath, rolled her shoulders, and only then got up. The officer was not one of the men who arrested her. He was younger, with a fresh face, just a hint of unease in his posture. The kind of man who joined the force thinking he would be making a difference. Isabella had seen his type before. Eventually they hardened or left. He led her down a narrow hallway, the hum of the fluorescent lights whispering above. The police station wasn't particularly large, just another cog in the machine of a system that had been running on corruption for decades. They stopped in front of a small room, which had a single steel table and 2 chairs. Isabel's hands were still handcuffed, but she didn't complain when the officer guided her inside. Sitting at the table, there was a man in a wrinkled suit. His tie loosened enough to suggest he wanted to appear casual. It wasn't. His face was marked by the weight of too many cases, too many people dragged in and out as if they didn't matter. His supposed lawyer, Miss Morales, nodded in greeting. "My name is David Keller. I have been assigned to your case." Isabella sat down in front of him. She didn't smile. Keller looked at the officer, expecting him to leave, but the man just crossed his arms. "She's handcuffed," he pointed out. Keller sighed. "I still prefer to speak with my client alone." The officer didn't move immediately, but after a tense pause, he exhaled sharply and left, closing the door behind him. Keller rubbed his hands together as if gathering his thoughts. "Very well," it started. "First things first, they filed the charges." The words were calm but firm. Keller blinked. "Excuse me, the drugs were planted." Keller's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Miss Morales, I understand this is a stressful situation, but I'm not stressed." He interrupted you. "I'm informing you." Keller sighed, rubbing his 100. "Look, I'm not here to judge. My job is to get you the best possible outcome. Now, we're talking strategy. Taking a plea deal might be in your best interest." Isabella tilted her head. "And what exactly did you declare me guilty of?" That reading was doubtful. "Possession with intent to distribute." She laughed, short, sharp, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "Tell me," she said, leaning forward. "I look like a trafficker." Keller didn't respond. Isabella lay back. "No, I didn't think so." Keller sighed again, his patience wearing thin. "I'm trying to help her." "No," she corrected. "You're trying to move my case as quickly as possible so you don't have to waste time on it." That struck a nerve. Her jaw tightened. "Miss Morales, if this goes to trial, you could be facing serious time." "And if it goes," he said, "I'll walk." Keller frowned. "You sound very self-assured." She met his gaze. "I am." The silence stretched between them. Keller leaned back in his chair, eyes slightly narrowed. "You're not just a visiting university professor, are you?" Isabella didn't blink. "What do you think?" Keller exhaled, shaking his head. "Very well, there's no plea deal, but that means we're fighting this." A slow smile tugged at her lips. "All right," he said. "Now let's talk about how we're going to take them down." Hours passed, and the energy in the police station changed. Isabella was back in the detention cell, but now there was tension in the air. The officers exchanged glances with each other. The conversations were whispered. Something had changed, and Isabella could see it in the way their shoulders squared. A bit too rigidly, they were nervous. The door buzzed open again. Morales stood up. This time the officer didn't grab her roughly. He didn't need to do it. She walked with him willingly, her posture relaxed, head held high. They took her down a different hallway this time, passing rows of cluttered desks with paperwork and half-empty coffee cups. At the far end, standing next to the captain's office, was Calvo, the same officer who had planted the drugs. His face had lost its previous arrogance. She smiled. The captain's office was larger than the interrogation room, but somehow it felt smaller, cramped. The walls lined with filing cabinets and a large oak desk in the center. Behind him sat Captain Roberto Vans, a man with gray temples and a permanent scowl. She didn't sit down. He didn't either. Isabella Morales said slowly. She met his gaze. "Captain." He let out a breath, shaking his head. You're a pain in the ass. Do you know that? She smiled. Only when people make bad decisions. Vance stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached for the drawer of his desk. She didn't move while he took out a single, thick folder lined with documents. He threw it onto the desk in front of her. Your file. Isabella's eyebrow arched. Vance exhaled sharply. Who the hell are you, Morales? She shrugged. That's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? Vance's jaw tightened. We checked your identification. We reviewed your mystery. You don't exist. Silence. Then Isabella laughed, shaking her head. Oh, Captain, she murmured, you really should have done your homework first. The tension in the room thickened. She leaned forward, hands still handcuffed, and lowered her voice. Just slightly. Because by the time you find out, she said, it will already be too late. Vance didn't move, didn't speak, because deep down he already knew that this wasn't just any teacher. This wasn't just any woman they could bury under false charges. They had arrested the wrong person, and now they were in a heap of trouble. The police station was no longer a place of order. It was a place of whispers. The usual sounds of phones ringing and keyboards clicking were drowned out by something heavier. Uneasy. Isabella Morales stood in the captain's office. Her wrists still handcuffed, but the balance of power had already begun to shift. Captain Roberto Vance sat behind his desk, eyes moving between her and the thick file in front of him. The weight of what he had just discovered pressed down on his shoulders. You're not just some teacher, Isabella murmured. She gave him a small, slow, knowing smile. I never said it was. Van exhaled, fingers drumming against the edge of his desk. He knew that the moment his name had been checked through the correct databases, the moment he saw what was buried under layers of authorization levels far beyond his reach, everything had crumbled. But there were others in the department who still didn't know, others who still thought this was a routine arrest, another easy case that would disappear into the system. The officers who had planted the evidence, who had handcuffed her, who had smirked at her as if she were just another. Statistics still believed they had won. Vance picked up the file and slammed it shut, leaning forward. Isabella didn't respond. She didn't have to do it. His voice dropped. How high? She tilted her head slightly. You tell me. Van hesitated, but only for a second. Director. The word barely left his lips, but it was enough to make the walls of the precinct seem smaller, the air heavier. Isabella Morales, the woman sitting across from him in handcuffs, was not just another officer. She was the one giving the orders. She was the one they had arrested. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her hand over her face. Jesus Christ. Outside the office, the sound of laughter came from the break room. The officers who had orchestrated the whole thing were celebrating. They had no idea what was coming. Vance swallowed hard. This is wrong. Isabella's eyebrow raised. For whom? His silence was answer enough. She leaned back, giving him space to process. Vance wasn't a fool. He had been in this job long enough to know when a situation had crossed the point of no return. And this was the finish, the end of a career. Say something, Isabella said. Her voice light, conversational. Did you know? Van's eyes locked onto hers. What did he know? That your officers were corrupt. His jaw tightened. I run a clean department. She let out a soft murmur, her gaze shifting towards the office window. Through the glass she could see the men who had arrested her, laughing, patting each other on the back, as if they had just won some kind of prize. She turned to Van. No, he said. You don't, he bristled. You don't know anything about my precinct. I know that 2 of your officers planted drugs on a federal officer. Van shuddered. I know the prosecutor has already drafted an indictment. His silence lingered. And I know, he continued, his voice dropping only slightly, that if I don't get out of here in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to make a phone call that will take down your entire department. Van's hands curled into fists on the desk. The weight of the situation had fully settled on him. Now, if this got out, if Washington found out what had happened, his career wouldn't just end, it would be obliterated. His officers, his precinct, his badge, everything would burn. Isabella watched the realization, hitting him like a train in slow motion. Then he finally moved. With a reluctant breath, he took a key from his belt and unlocked her handcuffs. The moment the metal clicked open, Isabella rubbed her wrists, exhaling softly, not in relief, because she had never been worried, but in quiet satisfaction. She stood up. Bands remained seated, watching her like a man who had just witnessed the ground opening beneath his feet. "I suggest," Isabella said softly, "that you call those officers before I do." Bands didn't argue. He was already reaching for the intercom. The announcement came seconds later, echoing through the precinct. "Officers Dunlap and Torres, report to my office immediately." The laughter in the break room stopped. Isabella didn't wait. She left the office, passed Band's desk, and headed towards the main floor of the precinct. All eyes turned towards her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The officers who had arrested her, Dunlap, the bald one, and Torres, his smiling partner, walked toward the office. Their confidence still intact, still believing they had the upper hand. Then they saw her standing there, free of handcuffs, and their faces changed. Torres slowed down. Dunlap's mocking smile faltered. Isabella's expression remained neutral as they passed by her, but as they entered the captain's office, she turned just slightly. "Enjoy it," Dunlap murmured, hesitating. Enjoy what he found in her gaze, her dark and unwavering eyes. The last 5 minutes before his career ends. Dunlap's mouth opened, but before he could respond, Bands's voice shouted from the office. "Close." The door, it slammed shut behind them. Isabella turned towards the precinct floor, scanning the room. Other officers avoided her gaze. Some whispered, some simply stared, confusion and unease settling over them like a fog. Then, from the far end of the room, a voice shouted, "Principal Morales!" The room froze. Isabella looked over her shoulder. A man stood at the entrance of the police station, dressed in a dark suit. His posture straight, professional, a federal agent. He raised his badge. "Ma'am, we are here to take you home." A slow smile touched Isabella's lips. She nodded once, took a step forward, and left the police station. Behind her, the walls of corruption were already crumbling. The trip to the federal building was silent, the weight of the last few hours pressing in the space between Isabella and the agent sitting next to her. The city lights blurred as they passed, neon rays against the polarized windows of the black SUV. She flexed her wrists, still feeling the phantom weight of the handcuffs. "Are you okay, Director?" The driver finally asked, looking at her through the rearview mirror. Isabella didn't respond immediately. Her fingers drummed lightly against her knee, the only sign of the calculations running through her mind. "I will be," he murmured. The car entered an underground garage, security personnel already waiting. The moment he stepped out, the agents stood at attention. Some seemed relieved, others furious. None of them asked what had happened. They already knew. A man in a tailored navy blue suit approached, his expression tense but controlled. Director Morales said, "The Attorney General is waiting for you." She nodded and walked past him, taking the private elevator to the upper floor. The door slid open, revealing an extensive conference room lined with glass windows overlooking the city. Sitting at the long mahogany table was the Attorney General, an older man with graying hair and tired eyes, and beside him a woman in an elegant black suit, head of Internal Affairs. Neither seemed pleased. Isabella entered slowly and deliberately and took the empty seat in front of them. For a long moment no one spoke. Then, finally, the Attorney General exhaled sharply, placing his hands on the table. "You've caused quite a mess, Director." Isabella found her gaze unyielding. "No," she corrected. "I presented one." The woman next to him, Internal Affairs, leaned forward with her hands clasped. "The officers who arrested you are already detained," said her captain. He tried to protect them, but after seeing your record, he folded. "They have admitted to planting evidence, taking bribes, coercing witnesses. The entire precinct is under investigation." Isabella allowed herself a small, satisfied nod, and the prosecutor asked. The Attorney General exchanged a glance with Internal Affairs. "Suspended pending review," the woman replied. "I was eager to expedite your case, too eager. It turns out he Has a history of winning suspiciously high-profile convictions. Isabella leaned back in her chair. The pieces had fallen into place faster than she expected. One thing was going after street-level corruption. Another was discovering a pattern, a network, a machine designed to channel people into a system built to break them. "This will not be the last time this happens," the Attorney General said. He sighed. "No, it won't be." His eyes met hers, studying her carefully. "Do you understand the gravity of what you did?" he asked. Isabella tilted her head. "Clarify. You just turned a local incident into a federal scandal. The media are going to take this. The public is going to demand accountability. This is not going to go away quietly." Isabella smiled slowly and sharply. "Good." The Attorney General pinched the bridge of his nose. "HALING. Do you realize the kind of enemies you're making, right?" Isabella's expression didn't change. "If they are my enemies," she said, "they were never the right people to begin with." The silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Internal Affairs leaned back, nodding slightly. "Your move, Director." Isabella inhaled deeply, feeling the tension in her body as she sat down. "My move," she repeated. He pushed his chair back and stood up, adjusting the cuffs of his blazer. "Prepare the press." Both the Attorney General and Internal Affairs frowned. "Are you going to make it public?" Isabella gave a small knowing smile. "I was arrested in broad daylight," she said. "The cameras were already rolling before they put me in the car. The world is waiting for an answer." The Attorney General hesitated, but he knew she was right. The story had already escaped containment. The only way forward was through. Isabella turned towards the window, looking over the city. It looked different now, not broken, just in need of a reckoning. Hours later, Isabella stood at a podium, a row of microphones in front of her. The room was packed, reporters, cameras, flashing lights. The air was thick with expectation. She adjusted the microphone. "Good evening," her firm voice began to carry through the room. "As many of you know, I was illegally arrested yesterday." The murmurs rippled through the crowd, but she continued. "The officers responsible have been taken into custody. An investigation into systemic corruption within the precinct is already underway. But let's be clear, this is not just a case. This is about a pattern that has existed for too long." The murmurs grew louder, the cameras closed in. Every day, innocent people, disproportionately black and brown, are funneled into a system designed to work against them. Not because they committed a crime, but because corruption thrives when no one is watching. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Well, I'm watching." A silence fell over the crowd. "I may be the director of the FBI," she said. "But this is not just my fight. This is our struggle, and it's time we stop treating justice as if it belonged to a privileged few." Isabella looked directly at the cameras. "This ends now." The room erupted in questions, voices overlapping, but Isabella stepped away from the microphone, walking off the stage as agents flanked her on both sides. Her work hadn't ended. It was just beginning.